yards, 500 yards from the water tower that's back here. We've had reports of spot fires, Frank. Page 15 is
That first day we saw it start just in the Front Range. It was not in the city of Colorado Springs, it was in an unincorporated area of the county. By afternoon that column was laying down, which meant that it was being affected by wind. But winds are unpredictable. The fire quickly turned and came back towards Colorado Springs. We realized quickly it was going to exceed our resources, so we called in early a FEMA overhead team to come in and to manage that fire.
So from the time it hit the top of Queens Canyon, we estimated we would have about 4 hours to evacuate. The way the winds picked up and pushed that down, we had on the order of 45 to 50 minutes.
The firefighters that were up there said it sounded to them like a tornado. Flames were, their estimate, 100 feet into the air.
We'd never seen fire burn downhill at over 50 miles an hour before, but that's exactly what happened. And it came right into Colorado Springs, jumped from house to house to house.
all companies on
There was children playing in front yards, and now tricycles and bicycles on front lawns. I remember watching mothers grab their children and throw them in car seats and throw things into the car as I would drive through and say, "You've got to go now."
We are leaving the area. Pull out now.
You could smell the smoke, you could taste it. That ember shower was very destructive because we had a lot of wood shake roofs, and we were seeing houses catching on fire within minutes of one another.
We had 105 residents of varying degrees of mobility. And that was quite a challenge, as you can imagine. It escalated and came over the ridge line, and we evacuated within an hour all of our residents from the facility.
South of this location.
It's heartbreaking when you see citizens that are in long trains of vehicles that are trying to evacuate an area with an uncertainty. They don't know if they'll ever get back to see their properties or not.
At Chapita Park Elementary.
This is something that we have to tackle. We cannot retreat. We have to be here. The community is relying upon us.
From engine 9.
In Colorado Springs, for many, many years, we've been saying that it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when.
And so in the early 2000s, we started to look at how do we address that risk? What are we going to do to, number one, identify the problem, and then try to deal with that threat and mitigate those issues.
Our fire chief at the time was Manny Navarro, and he came from the Oakland Hills Fire Department, in which they lost a tremendous amount of homes in the early 90s. And so our program was really born off that chief that gave the directive. One of the facets that we have is chipping programs. We have education programs. We have cost-share stipend programs. We have code enforcement programs. We regulate and assist with fire code implementation for the city of Colorado Springs. You have to build that education. You have to build the partnership. You have to build that collaboration in order to get all these other facets of the diamond to work. Unfortunately, in 2012, during the Waldo Canyon fire, we tested our theories, test our mitigation, test our education. How well does our community know about wildfire risk? And we tested their experiences and seeing what they were able to do. And we didn't have a single person that came to us and said, "You never told me about wildfire risk." We didn't have a single person that said that. Instead, we had people that came to us and said, "You told us this wasn't occur, but we have an immense amount of work ahead of us."
And the work that started in 2000 got us to the point where we received over $3 million in grants from FEMA. And so we've obviously utilized that money toward the mitigation of various properties that are in our hillside.
Because we had very old storm windows on the nursing center. They were years old. We obviously want to keep the residents inside. It is safer for them to shelter in place rather than move folks who have mobility issues, health issues. Christina Randall from the Colorado Springs Fire Department said, "Hey, I think you might be eligible for a FEMA grant." And it's a huge deal for us because we're not-for-profit. And there's no way we would be able to afford that without the FEMA grant.
With FEMA grants, I think they were absolutely essential to us because homeowners by themselves wouldn't be able to afford the magnitude of the effort that we were starting to envision. We actually mitigated over 100 acres.
Through the neighbors working together, we were able to match funds from FEMA, and we probably spent close to $300,000 doing mitigation on the outskirts of our neighborhood in community property in a conservation easement area.
FEMA Region 8, we provide grant dollars. We view our programs as one of the cornerstones of a good emergency management program. A community working to build resiliency and build a stronger community is critical before any type of natural disaster occurs.
Taking mitigation action has a strong return on investment. I believe the latest numbers are $6 to 1 for every dollar spent in reducing those hazards and the need for response and recovery resources, which after a disaster are so much harder to implement as opposed to taking a mitigation action.
Some people fear mitigation as being clear-cutting. That is absolutely what it's not about, because you've got to use that vegetation to hold the hillside in. We do the work and then we come back up and they're like, I can't believe this, it's so beautiful, it looks like a park, we can see the animals now. We see deer where we never saw them before. It was because it was so thick you couldn't even see them.
Where we've actually come through and actually removed the fuel, chipping back over it with the chips to help with the erosion is very important, along trying to keep the natural landscape of the park and not take away from it.
It's a 300-acre conservation easement. We mitigated 100 acres. We saved 90% of that conservation easement. We created an absolutely beautiful park where the forest is healthier. Our whole effort is to preserve the conservation easement in perpetuity, and by doing this type of work, we've actually done that.
We've got a very resilient community. Over 95% of those homes are now rebuilt. People are back reoccupying them. But they're occupying homes that have been better engineered, that are going to be more resistant to wildfire.
Some of the breaks in the fuel were created by the landscaping of the homeowners. Trees were separated apart. They had non-combustible materials around the base of their houses. Properly mitigated environment in the work that we do, it protects firefighters' lives.
I will say that the ordinance that we crafted here works superbly for the city of Colorado Springs. Obviously, we've been students of wildfire for a number of years. For many years, we've been adding parts and pieces to a draft ordinance, if you will. Government work being what it is, you have to wait for the political will to occur before you really can enact big change. Within 2 weeks of that fire, we provided those drafts of code resolution to increase the resiliency by hardening the structures, and they worked with us to, within 6 months, pass an ordinance. We were able to enact those new hardened requirements for the structures into those homes with the collaboration and cooperation of those homeowners as well as the rest of the community, and insurance to help us on the rebuilding of those homes. Each community has some specific nuances that need to be considered for those specific communities, but that requires the partnership and the cooperation and communication among all the vested partners to create a standard and a code that works best for each community.
Each of our addresses in the wildland urban interface, 36,485, have a unique individual rating associated with their parcel. So homeowners, when they look at this map rating, they call our department and they say, what can I do to get my color rating down? So this is a tool we use to engage the homeowners, to have us come out and talk to them, and then also have them go to the neighbors, share that responsibility, talk to their neighbors and say, have you seen the map?
Sharing the responsibility became our tagline. It was very important that the community understand that they needed to share in the responsibility. They needed to take ownership.
At every one of our homeowners association meetings, we have discussions about wildfire mitigation. Every year we have a safety and security festival here that the fire department comes and supports.
They've done a lot of mitigation work out here. They've used our grounds for training, so we have a really good relationship with the Colorado Springs Fire Department.
The benefit of all of the work that we've done in Mountain Shadows, though, is when we rebuild, we're going to come back far stronger and far more resistant than we have ever been before. So in some respect, it's a legacy ordinance that this community has worked on. But they banded together and understand the importance of that. And I think that's the significant piece, that again, without FEMA's contributions and FEMA's help and guidance through all of these processes over these years, we wouldn't have been able to get that done.
When those community members were reintroduced to their property, the Colorado Springs Fire Department was there to help them. We gave them gloves so they could sift through their foundations. We gave them water so that they wouldn't get dehydrated. And we were there with sunscreen, something that you wouldn't normally think of, but they didn't have anything. just providing them a little bit of protection from the sun made a big difference. And then probably the most important thing that our firefighters kept with them was Kleenex, just some tissue, because it was heartbreaking. It was devastating, not only for the community, but for our firefighters as well. I saw a lot of long hugs that day, and I saw a lot of tears shed, both in uniform and out of uniform. People were just devastated by seeing all of their possessions lost and wondering how that next step was going to take place.
The fire did a lot of damage that day, and we lost 347 homes. Unfortunately, we lost 2 lives as well. The education piece is continuous. We have to continue to educate homeowners as they move into the community. We are reinventing things every month that can improve the success in the future.
Communities across the nation need to take advantage of lessons learned. So instead of recreating the wheel, we're leveraging the wheel that's already been created and sharing that knowledge.
Many organizations around the country are taking proactive steps the way the Colorado Springs Fire Department is.
Oftentimes communities will invest in a project and they don't see that return immediately. In Colorado Springs, we did have a wildfire come through and actually put the project to the test, and it proved that mitigation can work and does work. And so this is a really great example of that.
So I know that the human spirit drives us for the good of the community here. Something that we have all over the United States is we have hope and we have love for our neighbors.
We want to make this community safe. We work together to do that, and every person in this organization has to know what their role is in fulfilling that mission.
Well, my wife and I have lived here for 16 years, and it's the most fantastic place I've ever lived.
A week after we'd been evacuated, I stood at the top of this hill and saw where the fire had reached. And I stood there with Christina Randall, and I watched Christina cry because she realized how much work still needed to be done. You know, here everybody was being proud of what we had accomplished, and she was, you know, going, my gosh, we got so much further to go.
For more on FEMA's Hazard Mitigation Assistance Program and wildfire mitigation, visit fema.gov/hazard-mitigation-assistance. And for additional tips and best practices, including a closer look at the Colorado Springs Fire Department's Sharing the Responsibility program, visit coloradosprings.gov/wildfire mitigation and colorado.gov/DHSEM.